Hey everybody, Sherri Echols here. I am with my friend Alex McCarty. He's my favorite inspector for all the houses that I have buyers for. I always recommend him first. How you doing today, Alex?
I'm great.
It's
Staying
so
out
good
of
to
the
see
sun
you.
today.
Yeah, some days are like that. So we're looking into what kind of safety things you look for when you're inspecting a home. I know there are a whole ton of things that you look at, but what are things in particular that are safety items that you want people want to be sure to watch out for?
Well, some of that depends on exactly what you're looking at, but home wise. But something people don't think about is railings. You know, you get into a house and especially a lot of our new construction, they have to build up, and so if you have more than three steps to get into or onto a patio or a deck, you're supposed to have a handrail. And that seems kind of unimportant until it gets icy and you realize
Right.
that that's the only thing that matters. But the other thing is, when you get into houses that have stairways or balconies, a lot of older homes they weren't considering personal safety or pet safety, and so railings are much lower. The current requirement is 36 inches on a rail. A lot
Hmm.
of older ones might be 30, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you stand next to it and realize it's not above your waistline, you could easily fall over it. And so considering, adults with mobility issues, and then if you ever had a toddler, how
Right.
how exploratory they are. They can get on a counter and you even didn't even know that was possible. But then, aside from that, what we call balusters, but those are the rails, the vertical rails on your stairway and on your balconies. There's a specific distance between those, and it's designed specifically. It's 4.5 inches, or a sphere that's 4.5 inches, but it's designed not to be able to get somebody's head through there, not
Right.
just the child, but also your pet. Cats are
Yeah.
one thing. Cats can get anywhere they want to, but they're generally smart enough. But I mean, if you have a small dog, they're occupied by chasing something right through a railing. It's unfortunately it's not uncommon. We see
Right.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about that. My one of my dogs, she can jump over a 6 foot fence, but if she was upstairs in a short balcony, I can see her flying over it to get to the door for the UPS
Oh
guy.
yeah,
Dumb
absolutely.
dog.
And I have a very hyperactive dog, and we have wood floors, and I watch him peel out on the floors all the time. So consider somewhere for him to actually, he already slides into the fireplace and the front door, but if there was an
Right.
actual hazard that he could get into.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's stuff that, as far as personal safety, that people don't consider until we bring it up to them is there fire safety, in a home? Do we have smoke alarms? Do we have smoke alarms in the right areas, inside your bedrooms, in the hallways, outside of? And then carbon monoxide detectors. It's a thing that people don't consider unless you watch Dateline, but
Right.
but carbon monoxide is very dangerous, and it can be present in just about any house. If you have an attached garage, you have the potential for carbon monoxide inside your house, even if you don't have gas appliances. But if
Okay. Yeah, I was going to
you
follow
you
up with
know
that question. Yeah.
you pull into your garage and you're talking on the phone or you're texting or whatever it is that we're constantly consumed with, that's not what's going on around us, and just sit in there for a while with your car running. You might have the door open and you're not poisoning yourself, but you could be filling areas of your home with carbon dioxide. So you it's a simple fix that can save your life. And if you don't know, if you're not looking for it, you're not going to know what it is. If you look up on the ceilings in the hallways of a house, usually it's legible on there whether that
Mhm.
detector is a carbon monoxide detector or not. Um, and then electrical safety is always an issue in a home. Most people don't know they have them, but they're present in homes from as far back as the 70s. But ground fault circuit interrupters, but most people call them GFIs. They're plugs that have the little test and reset button on them. You're
Mhm.
supposed to have those in bathrooms, in kitchens, in garages, on your exterior walls. And so if you're keyed to look for them, you'll see them. But what most people don't understand about them is that they protect an entire circuit. So sometimes they can be in the breaker panel and your plugs won't have the switch on them, but they are protected. At that point, the electricians put a little sticker on there that says this is GFCI protected. But the other thing is, because they protect the circuit, a lot of times, you'll have several outlets in a row that are on that circuit. So all you need is one. You just need it at the head of the circuit, and it protects everything downstream. So if that trips, every electrical plug after that loses power. And so a lot
Yeah.
of times you find them in one bathroom and in one spot in the kitchen, in one plug in your garage. But that doesn't mean you don't have them everywhere, that you don't have protection everywhere. Um, and then, and these are things that I'm tasked with,
Easy for you to
but
say, hey, hey, hey,
yeah,
speaking of
through
said
my,
dog.
oh yeah, but through my licensure. But the current electrical code and building code require you to have fire safety on your circuit breakers for any of your circuits that are living spaces, so bedrooms, living rooms, hallways. And those specific breakers are really interesting. If you're a nerd like me, they monitor the sine wave of the current and they look for distortion. They're not actually looking at the specific action of the electricity, they're looking at what it's doing. And so they trip if there's something that looks like an arc that could cause a fire. They're great, um, but they're great if your home was designed to have them in it. Uh, yeah, if you have an older home, they're not
Mhm.
designed for the load, and they end up causing problems because they just trip and you lose power for no reason. Things like your hair dryer or a an older vacuum cleaner, sometimes hair straighteners, the type of appliances that you might use in grooming. Those things can cause it. Anything with a motor,
Yeah.
beard trimmers, that kind of stuff. Um, but and then another thing people don't consider, especially safety wise, is windows. Most people think of windows as being a way to get natural light into the house, which that's part of why they're required. But window functionality, window size, those things are all intended for safety because you need secondary escapes from your house. So windows in a bedroom are required specifically for that reason. Yes, they're for light, but they call them egress windows, and that's
Right. And
because they're intended to escape.
in some of the older houses, they're up higher than they should be for climbing out of easily. So that's something I've seen come up on some reports that you've done for me or
Yep,
for my
that's
clients
a
anyway.
yeah, that's a big one in 60s and 70s. They built windows with the windowsill very high. And so,
Mhm.
and the windows, if they have a stationary pane and they only slide on the outside edges, you don't have enough openable space to get in there. Part of the other issue, part of the requirement is that the windowsill be low enough that you could get over it, even if you have mobility or access issues. And then it's supposed to be openable, supposed to have enough openable space for a firefighter with their bunker gear or their rescue breathing equipment on their backs to make it through. So it's just shy of 6 feet of 6 square feet of openable space. 5.7, I believe, is the exact requirement. But and then that they should open.
That
That's the
that's
other
all.
thing.
That's just in the bedrooms, right?
Correct.
Because
Correct.
usually other rooms have an entrance and in and out outrance.
Yes. And if you've got a room that's got its own door to the exterior, then that's the window sizes doesn't become an issue because you actually have an exit.
Right.
Um, and there's things like window sill heights in second floor windows have to be above 2 feet so that you can't open a window and a child fall out. If
Yeah.
it's within 6 feet of the walking surface. There's a lot of nuance to that people are looking at it thinking, oh, I like this, but maybe we can move this window or maybe we can open this wall or close this off. You have to consider that kind of thing. And then a lot of times people put clamps on their windows so they can't be opened, thinking they're stopping,
Security. Yeah.
burglars. Yeah, which isn't a bad idea, but there is a purpose for that window. And yes, as long as you know that that's there and you can't use that, and if you do need to get out, you need to throw a chair through it and then jump through the window.
Right. Right.
It's the kind of thing. And one of the easiest things that I immediately look for, because it's always at the front or the back door, is the deadbolt lock. Um, the building code says you should just have a thumb latch that's easily openable. And a lot of times for security purposes, people want to put a keyed deadbolt on the inside so that if
Hmm.
somebody breaks the window next to it, they can't just reach in and unlock the door,
Right.
which again, if security is your concern, um, but you also have to understand in an emergency, you don't want to be looking for that key. And then also 99% of the time that key is just in the lock anyway. So it's not the same. It's not
Right.
giving you that secure position that you think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So you know,
back to the electric stuff. I know a lot of times, like up in the attic, people may not know, or they may try to do their own DIY electric stuff. And there'll be stuff up there, wires that are up there without a cap on them,
mm-hmm.
exposed wires and things like that. Those are things you have to
Very,
be
yeah,
careful of.
yeah. A lot of times people think that if you need another light or you need another outlet or you put a TV above your fireplace, you just cut into an electrical, turn the power off, cut into a line, and splice it in together. That will get you the service there, but those splices, the wire nuts that you use are just threaded enough to get tension on that wire so that you keep a connection, but they come off very easily. And in an
Yeah.
attic space, if you're fumbling around or you're crawling on ceiling joists and not paying attention, it doesn't take much contact to get shocked. So you're supposed to put those in a junction box. You're supposed to cover them up. But the other thing is, the electrical circuits in your home are designed for a specific load, and they're routed specifically. So if you don't know whether you're cutting into a light switch uh, or another plug from another room, that you don't know what it's on. And so those are things that we look at, and I tell people, hey, you have these splices in here, they can be dangerous. The chances of you ever getting there are very slim, but if you do, the results is pretty dire. And you leave that stuff open. People don't, most people don't want to admit this, but the amount of other lives that are crawling through your attic, rodents can find their way in there. That little rubber on the outside of wiring, they just love to chew on.
Yeah.
So you get something up there gnawing on these open wires, and then you can really create some issues. So it's, it's, these are the kind of things that we're there to look for. Crawl through the back of your attic, find that, because that's where they always are. No one does it in the easy spot. You do
Right.
it
Right.
that way, the shortcut way, because you're laying on your stomach and with a flashlight in your mouth, and you just want to get out of there.
Yeah.
But
And the rodents tend to crawl around the edges, and that might be where they would chew it up too. So,
oh yeah,
what do you do
absolutely.
about that? I mean, is that worth having some, it's inspecting for periodically, or I mean,
The
what would you say on
problem, yeah, with the problem with pests that can do that kind of stuff, the biggest thing is keeping them out. So, yeah, it's a good idea, because there's always entrance points on your house. If you have somebody come out, like pest control companies, is something that they do very well. They'll do what they call an exclusion, where they come out and they'll look for all these entrance points, and then they have specific materials they use. Some places you want to use mesh, some places you can use foam, some places you need to use metal flashing that's solid. But stopping those points are the big ones. The hard part about it is if you live in an area that's got a lot of trees, or you have, a green belt behind you like everybody wants. So it looks like
right?
you're looking out on the forest. There's a lot of things that live out there. And when it gets cold or when it gets wet or when it gets hot, they're looking for somewhere to get out of that. And, you know, most rodents just need a gap the size of their head, then their bodies just flatten down to nothing. So it's difficult to keep them out. Um, Fortunately, we I don't see a ton of that. You really have to be creating that scenario yourself by, you know, the times where I see really bad infestations where they're up there and they're just eating everything. It's because, people are
Hmm.
storing a lot of pet food. in open containers, or you have a lot of uh, usually it's cleanliness issues,
Yeah.
home housekeeping that starts driving them in. You gotta do a couple of things. You got to get rid of their source, the stuff they're looking for, food and water, and then
Mhm.
close up
Yeah.
the
And
properties. Once they find they can't get in or they don't need anything, they don't come back immediately.
I've seen, well, had squirrels come into, that's not necessarily an infestation of like mice or rats or anything, but they just come in for fun, I think. I hear them playing football on my roof every morning.
Yep.
And my mom and dad, even they have a big house, they've had them, they chew the siding and come in. And I don't
Oh
know that
yeah.
they've chewed any wires, but there was a baseball mitt up there in the attic that they chewed all the laces out of. Weirdest thing. Yeah.
I I am always intrigued because I same thing. There's you can hear the running around in the morning. There's one that we have a window that kind of goes up a little bit on the roof, and my son calls him the morning squirrel because it's always there in the morning.
Yeah.
But they chew on lead flashings on your roof. I think it's they just their teeth need to be sharpened. I don't know. I'm not
But they're
a
like rabbits and stuff. Their teeth continually grow, right? Where they have to chew on stuff
yeah.
to keep them down, I
Yep.
think. That's
That's
not a
that's
safety
my
issue for the house,
understanding.
but interesting
Well,
side
there's
fact.
yeah, it's a potential for sure.
Yeah.
And the thing with safety, a lot of that's addressed by the authorities. So like the International Residential Building Code, the National Electric Code, all these things, the National Plumbing Code, they deal with that stuff. And so every time there's a new addition to that, it's now we need this safety piece because something happens, somebody gets hurt, and they decide, okay, this happens enough, we need to change something. So now, you know, tamper resistant electrical plugs are required, and those are ones that most people hate because they're nearly impossible to plug something into, but you also can't stick a fork in it and
Right.
get shocked though.
Yeah.
um and plumbing is actually one that people don't think about as a safety, that it has safety backups on it. But when you look under your sink, the trap, the P trap or the
Mhm.
gooseneck that you see under there, that's not just there to catch your rings or your earrings or whatever it is you drop down the sink. It's intended to hold water so that sewer gas can't make its way up through the sink and
Right.
then and get in the house and cause people from being sick. But um, even more so, your toilets are designed that way. That your commodes need to be flush on the floor. They need to be mounted securely, and the seal, the wax ring or the rubber ring, whatever you've used, needs to be
Mhm.
intact because the commode is the trap. So if that's open, you have the potential for sewer gas to get in, which sounds like an inconvenience, but it can poison you. And the very worst case scenarios, besides getting ill, they can affect your cognition. So you can end up with symptoms that mimic dementia just
Hmm.
from being exposed to too much of that.
Wow.
And it's something that you just, it's not necessarily silent or odorless, but people get used to an issue like that. And especially if you're a homebound person, you work from home, or elderly people, that's where part of the big concern is, like
Yeah.
my grandmother hardly left her house. Everything she did was in there. In that situation, you know,
Yeah.
you can end up with those type of problems. So,
My this same dog we're talking about, she I know gross, but they drink out of the toilet, right?
yeah, which
My
whose dog
hall,
doesn't?
right. My hall bathroom. I never go in there. I go in my room. But I was one day I started smelling something kind of rank, a little bit, not too terrible, but that's unusual for inside. I'm looking for an accident or something one of the dogs did, but she had drunk the toilet so dry that sewer
Oh,
gases were coming out of there. I just have to be sure I go in there and flush it every day.
oh
Crazy
yeah.
dogs.
Oh yeah, it happens a lot in that type of situation. A half bathroom that people don't use very often,
Yeah.
or the kids grow up and move out and they don't use their Jack and Jill bathroom anymore. Those traps in the sinks go dry. A lot of people are aware of it, so they'll pull the stopper or put the drain plug in the bathtub. But um, it's one of those things that you don't know it's an issue unless you know it's an issue, and just most people aren't aware of it because that's
Yeah.
the tub, that's the toilet, that's just it's where we run water. We don't consider that there's a potential um, in that. But even gas gas appliances, of course there's some potential there. It's fire, it's gas, there's they're poisonous, all those things. But uh, when people remodel homes, they don't consider those type of things. So where you had a garage that had your furnace in it and your water heater, and you turn it into the fifth bedroom so your nephew can move in or you can rent the house for more, the building code does not allow you to have a fuel fired appliance in a sleeping room or a bathroom, because they're going to burn oxygen. So the
Right.
idea is you don't want to be in a room that you typically occupy with the door closed with a gas appliance, because you guys are both using oxygen, and it's going to win whether it burns all the oxygen and goes out and fills the house with gas, or you're asleep and you are starved of oxygen. And when those things don't have enough oxygen, then they burn heavier carbon. They produce more carbon monoxide. So it's a lot of that I find constantly. In fact, just did a row of fourplexes that all had the furnaces, gas furnaces in the bathrooms of every single unit, and that was the only place they could pull their oxygen from. And they were built
How did they get inspected and approved if they?
they were built in the 70s before there was an
Okay.
IRC, and people didn't think about it. And they've been there. I assume there hasn't been any catastrophic issues, but it's something that I had to make my buyer aware that, you know, these really need another way to draw combustion here, not through these rooms. Because,
Yeah.
and it's, very few people are in a bathroom long enough with the door closed that can be an issue, but it definitely happens. It's the reason why when I was a kid, we had the little white gas heaters on the wall that you turn on and light a
Hmm.
match and get in the bathtub and it warms the room up. Those are not allowed at all because of that reason.
Yeah.
Parents lock a kid in there for an hour while he's playing in the bath and back. And I mean, you can be sick. Just the beginning of carbon monoxide poisoning kind of looks like the flu. You're lethargic and you feel nauseous, but it's a thing. And
Yeah. And
and then
if you're asleep, you don't even know you're feeling. I mean, yeah, it could be fatal.
absolutely, there. Homes are a great thing, but and I'm not an alarmist. I don't,
Right.
I'm not trying to scare people, but there's just a ton of things that always have to be in the back of your mind. Are we paying attention to what the potential is here? Stuff like um, gas cooktops. The biggest example is a house where has a gas range or a gas cooktop, and it's an older home. They change it out, but they don't put in a new supply line, a new flexible gas line. Everything now, just about everything, will require more gas than the previous appliance. And um, one of the first things I check when I see a gas cooktop is to turn all the burners on, and then the smallest burner, put it on low. And if it goes out, that tells me there's not enough gas to supply this appliance. And the, you know, then now we're just pushing gas into the house. Um, and again, that's a scenario that's very, very uncommon, but uh, when you use all your burners, it's when everyone's at home. You have everyone over for
Right.
Thanksgiving and your mashed potatoes and green beans and all the things that you're cooking, and you put something on simmer and don't realize that one went out, and now you just have an open gas line in your house, which unfortunately, when I moved into mine, that was the issue. I have an older built house, it's been remodeled, beautiful new appliances. Nobody replaced the gas line.
Gas line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
So there's a lot of those things like that.
So what
I've,
about
I've,
like something I've seen several times too on reports is in the electric box, there are too many wires coming into one or
yep,
one.
into a breaker.
Yes, that's it.
That's it, and that's kind of the similar thing, that we talked about earlier. The house is designed for a specific electrical load, and so your main panel has an amperage, 200 amps, 150 amps, 100 amps, 120, whatever that is. And then each breaker is designed for whatever that circuit is. Most of your living, your rooms are on 20 or 15 amp circuits, and your panel has a cumulative uh, amperage, but people add one in and they think, well, I'll just piggyback off of this breaker, and that is you're basically doubling the load uh,
Yeah.
on that. Um, and
These are
it,
DIY electricians, right? These aren't professionals, would
absolutely,
never do that,
and
right?
you know exactly, no, and that's true. There are breakers that are designed to have two wires connected to them. They're very specific. You just need to know that's what you're looking for, and you can do it. But yeah, people, you know, how prevalent things like YouTube are, and uh, any social media where you can get advice and
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks
YouTube
they can do.
University. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You can do anything,
Yeah. I
and
just
it's
changed out my disposal and a kitchen faucet last weekend. All by
well,
myself.
you should have got a permit for that work according to our municipality, just so you know.
Seriously?
Repair, replace, and install, I think, is their mantra. It doesn't matter
For
what it
a
is. They
kitchen
want
faucet? Really? Really?
it.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and their stance is that the cost of the permit is one price and the fine is double that. So if you get away with two of them, you're winning. As long as they don't catch you on more than two. Um, as a homeowner, you're supposed to be able to do those things, but your municipalities are like HOAs. You're kind of at the
Oh,
mercy
I'm in a no HOA neighborhood, so
yeah, yes. That was something that I was specifically looking for after my last one.
yeah, yeah.
um, but
Some are
yeah,
good, some are not.
yeah, they're great until your neighbor paints their house orange, and then you're like, God, I wish someone would say, there was someone beside me to say something.
Yeah, there's that, and then
Uh,
there's the neighbor who looks out the curtains at every single thing you're doing. It
yeah,
reports you all the
he
time.
comes over with the camera, pictures of your front porch or whatever it is. I watched that happen in my driveway just recently. Anyway, um, yeah, electrical is a big one, and it's a really simple concept, but there's a little more to it than just splicing wires and putting them underneath a screw. And yeah, the biggest thing is that you have to understand how your loads are designed and calculated, and what the thing you're adding requires, because that's something I'll see is somebody thinks, well, I just need this plug for a window unit. Well, that window unit probably needs a 30 amp breaker, not a 15. And
Yeah,
now you're really causing a problem, and that you'll never see because it's in your breaker panel, and the wiring is overheating at the breaker. And all of that's great if the breakers are new enough and you don't have any other dominoes fall. But every now and then we see that situation where the breaker is just bad and it didn't trip when it was supposed to, and so the wiring melted. The panels, for the most part, are going to handle some of that heat, but I open them all the time and find melted wires in them, and it's a product of the situation.
yeah, yeah. So is it more of a problem like on the older houses with the new, our new appliances, our new everything that we plug in is new and different than it was back in the 60s?
It it used to be. Now we're kind of on the other end of that curve. So there was, you know, uh, so the trend now is energy conservation. So everything that you buy new, for the most part, uses less energy than the previous version of it. So
Okay.
that's one thing I tell people: when you buy an older house, a lot of times the electrical service is smaller. Um, you know, 200 amps is a normal 150 amps to 200 is a normal electrical service for a house, but 50 years ago it was 100 to 125. And so there was a period where you really needed 200 amps to serve your home because everything was incandescent, tube TVs, Kirby vacuum cleaners, everything was
Right.
more horsepower, more horsepower. Now we're kind of on the back end of the other end of that curve. And so like LED bulbs are one of the greatest things in the world because they produce an incredible amount of light. They use very little energy. So a typical light bulb, an old screw in light bulb, would be 20 watts. When you buy an LED bulb now, they're 20-watt equivalent or 30-watt equivalent, but they only use 2.6 watts.
Oh,
That's
big difference.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and they don't get 300 degrees where they peel. If you touch them while they're on, they burn your skin. And so the benefit there is all over the place because they're not using the energy. One, so you're saving that cost, but also if they're not producing all that extra heat, think about how many light bulbs in your house you have. And when you have all the lights on in your living room and you've got a can light that's a 65 watt that is 300 degrees, how much heat that's putting in your house. And then you have to offset that with your AC system. Now that's running on its 65 amp breaker and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Just replacing light bulbs in a house, you can reduce your energy. I mean, I don't want to just grab a calculation out of the air, but
Right.
it
It's
it
a lot,
is
right?
definitely noticeable. Definitely noticeable.
Yeah.
Um, and I tell some people get upset the tiny little Christmas light bulbs that go into their stand fixtures, but they're worth it. Every bit of it. It's such a big deal.
Well, they last a lot longer too, right?
Oh yeah, now they cost more too, but
Right.
that's still a convenience. Instead of changing bulbs every 2 months, you don't think about it, and then when it does, you're surprised because you don't remember when the last time you replaced a light
Yeah,
bulb is.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
But it costs a little bit more, but probably, I don't know either exactly how much
yeah.
it saves on utility bill, but I would imagine that you save more than, I don't know.
Oh yeah, there's efficiency is a whole nother science too because it's there has to be a cost benefit to it, but those are one that's a really good proven technology.
Well, let's see. Anything else we haven't covered that people should watch for when well, you can look for these things while you're already in a house, but particularly when you're buying a house.
Yeah, we I when we're going through a house, some of this is just muscle memory from doing it over and over and over again. But something people don't think about too is, you convert another room and you have a step down into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as small of an issue as that is, tripping hazards, uneven floor surfaces, your body. So I believe it's 3/4 of an inch is all that is needed in a transition for your body to miss that.
Yeah.
You're looking for things as you walk that you don't realize. You're processing information, so you see that stuff. But if you have a floor elevation that changes just that less than an inch, it's just enough that it can catch your foot, but it's not enough that you're instinctively looking for it. And
Right.
you see it. It's happened to you before when you've walked into someone's house and it's
Yeah.
like hit your toe on that thing and almost fall. And you're like, how did I miss that? All it
Right.
is, it's just that much. But you carry that across rooms or even stairways. You're not allowed more than a third or a quarter of an inch difference between stair height when you're walking up and down stairs. When they build a stairway, today with the technology of equipment we have, they're pretty close,
Yeah.
but that's one that people don't notice. And you'll find that in a house. If you have one stair that's uneven, your cadence gets tripped up on that one
Yeah.
every single time, even if you know it's there. uh, and generally that's a product of being in a home that was built 50 years ago.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
little bit off or a remodel, but
It's stairs are weird. They're usually pretty much the same, but you get in a house that has like really short steps or really tall steps. It's like, wow, this is so different.
yep. Or the last one is one way or the other. The one at the very
Yeah,
top is just
yeah,
a little taller or just a little shorter,
yeah,
or the first one. But and what you don't realize is your body's used to that because all stairs are the same. It's there's this 7
yeah.
11 rule,
Rise and
not
run. Yeah,
yep, yep, not not higher than 7 and not shallower than 11. Um, and they all that way. But that's the kind of stuff that's taken into consideration. It's not just, hey, let's find this thing that everyone can use, but it's also based on some body mechanics of your what everyone's neurological operation is going to recognize. And so
right.
um, it's something, especially if you're buying a house, you walk in it a couple of times and you hit that step and don't think about it. But it's the once you realize, man, that's often every time I walk up my stairs, I hit this thing. I really should do something about that. It's kind of stuff you want to figure out on the front end.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there is definitely a lot to look for, and it's not always hiding because it's just things that you don't normally recognize. You know what the other big one is? This is the thing I always tell clients. This is something you know, but you don't know that you know it. That hot water should always be on the left side of a fixture.
Ah,
When you
yes.
turn on a faucet, the left one is always should always be hot and the right one should be cold. And it's something that you were taught because that standard was made forever ago. And you realize it when you go somewhere and you turn it on. It's like, wow, why did that burn my hand? Is this wrong? So
Yeah.
that's something that we check for because not only is that requirement is for all of us, but then water temperature is an important thing. So water heaters generally are set to stop their temperature at 120 degrees. That's the limit, the scald limit. Anything above that will physically burn your skin. So that's something we look for when we inspect. I take temperatures on the faucets. Um, and I try to do it on one that has a separate handle or at your kitchen sink because, again, because of building code safety, all of our showers and bathtubs have a safety feature in there that never allows you to get all hot water. It's always going to mix some cold water in so you don't burn yourself. But anything, especially when you hit 130 degrees, if you get that on your skin, that's I believe it's second degree burn.
Yeah.
You'll know it for a while.
Yeah. And little ones, we want to be especially careful with their little skin, so delicate.
Yep. And the thing that I run into is exactly this situation where the shower fixture has this scald guard on it, and it's never going to give you super hot water because the hotter you turn the water heater up, the more cold water it's going to mix into it. And so you're trying to get your shower super hot, and what you don't realize is all you've done is set your faucets at 150 degrees, and your children in their bathroom at the sink turn the water on, and that's where the real problem happens because their tub's going to be the same way, but it's that, and you get the scenario where your water is reversed and you've got hot water on the wrong side, and you learn that, and everyone operates that way, but your friend comes over to wash his hands, and now you just burned your best friend's fingers off.
Right. Yeah. That would not be good.
Yeah, it sounds simple, but it's just
The
it's
devil's in the
little things
details,
like
right?
that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like I said, that's the kind of stuff that's second nature that it until I start regurgitating, I realize, wow, that is pretty much every time you turn a corner, there's something to look at.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Well, I'm trying to think if there's any other questions or any other things I've seen on inspection reports, but
Yeah, you know, some of it is minor. Is there a light in the right spot?
mhm,
Um, attic spaces are supposed to have lighting in them, but they only have to have lighting if there's a mechanical equipment up there. So if your water heater and your AC is up there, the light's not convenience; it's for function. Something
mhm.
like that.
Well, attic
Um,
stairs too. That it comes up a lot of times. They're not installed with the right thing. They're a nail instead of a screw, right? And you could be standing on that ladder and it could come out, right?
Oh, absolutely. That is a manufacturer suggestion that I harp on because usually when you're climbing up that ladder, there's a big caution sign that says don't use screws. Use a very specific size of nail, a 16D nail. But the thing that again people don't consider is the design of that piece of that fastener. So a nail is meant to have shear strength, so it's designed to hold something in place. Screws are meant to withstand withdrawal, so they're meant to hold things down. So if you got something on a vertical plane, you want it nailed in. When you're putting a deck together, you want it screwed in because if that
Yeah.
wood starts to pull, the screw's going to hold in place. And and the shear strength that we're talking about is, you know, if you've anyone who's ever used a nail and a hammer knows if you're nailing it down and you hit it wrong, the nail bends,
Yeah.
but you can bend that nail back up and tap it a couple of times and you can get it to go straight back in. It'll go in because the nail doesn't break. It might give a little, but that strength is in the shear. With a screw, if you drive a screw halfway in and you just hit it crossways, it's going to snap. So the idea is on that attic ladder where it's screwed in up here. If you were standing on the ladder and the ladder broke, now all you're being supported by the strength of whatever fastener that is, and a screw at its thinnest point between the threads is very thin. So it would be a very specific scenario, but the manufacturers have decided we don't want to go down that road. So let's not even find out what that takes to make that happen. So
Yeah.
it's simple. And the great thing about that one is the fix is really simple. It's just, you don't even have to take the screws out. You just drive a nail right next to wherever there's a screw and you create that support that you really need.
Yeah.
But it's everywhere. And I find it on new homes. Builders don't like it, but I always, my point to them is always, if you're gonna, if there were anywhere that you could mitigate some liability, it's right here, and it's very simple. because
Yeah.
because if it's done the wrong way and someone gets hurt, and there's a big sign on there that says "Don't do it this way," and you did it the
Yeah.
wrong way,
Yeah.
there's not really any way to get
There's
out
a
of it.
reason that tags up, like just like there's a reason on the
Yeah,
blow dryer. Don't use it in the bathtub.
exactly, exactly.
Right.
You think
Yeah,
you don't need to vocalize those things, but some
exactly.
people need it.
My personal attic stairs were installed by someone who used to be in my life. And this person cut the bottom part wrong and decided, F it, I'm frustrated. I'm not fixing that. And so now I have some stairs that are like this, and then some stairs that are like a big step. So if I ever sell this house, I'm gonna have to put new steps in. But
they are a point of contention because they're very rarely okay. I mean, they're old wood, rickety. Doesn't take very long. Now they use some thicker stairs and or aluminum stuff like that. But most of the old ones, you pull them down and they're the joints are like that. One
right,
of the
right.
one of the rungs is broken somewhere. That's always one. And they have a weight limit on it, but you're never on one of those with just yourself. You're always carrying a box or
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
shove a piano up there, whatever it is that you
right.
put in the attic that you're not using at the time.
boxes of boxes of kids' books. I've got a whole mountain of them up there. I need to get out one of these days.
Oh yeah, bed frames, and I look at stuff, and even in my attic, like, how did that even get here?
Right, right.
Mine is.
And if the water heater's up there, that's a big heavy thing to lug up and down.
Oh, absolutely,
I
yeah,
suppose that's
and
why they leave them up there when they're dead.
yeah, yeah. That's the one you find out that there's an extra charge to remove the water heater from the attic. It's 1 fee to install a new water heater, but if it's in the attic, there's a whole nother charge.
Yeah, and not easy to bring back down.
Yeah,
Well, awesome sauce. Well, thanks for coming today. I appreciate all your advice for all the people.
yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, it was helpful and wasn't just boring,
Oh
droning
no,
on.
I think it's interesting, but that's us in the real estate world. So, if you
Yeah,
guys are looking to buy a house, consider using Alex as your inspector. He's been around and doing it for a long time. I trust him absolutely. He's done a great job for all my clients. And if there's a question afterwards, he'll even talk to you about, you know, answer your questions and explain
absolutely,
why he judged something the way he did. So, well, thanks for coming again.
absolutely. Anytime.
Mhm.